I believe that every great innovation is born out of a great question. But today's students aren't learning how to ask questions. I was visiting my little sister a couple of weeks ago who just started her first semester of college, and she asked me to help her with her biology homework. She had to do this digital worksheet where she would pick a question, see a drop down, pick an answer. No questions asked, just fill in the blanks. And she asked me, Jess, seriously, why do I need to learn this? How am I ever going to use this in the real world? And I turned to her. I just wanted to shake her and say, what are you talking about? This is biology. It's the study of your body. It's the study of our ecosystems. It's the way the world works. It's literally the study of the world that you live in. But then I stopped myself. Her asking, why do I need to learn this? Or how will I use this in the real world? Is a completely fair question. Especially when the cost of her education is at an all-time high, and that college degree no longer guarantees her a job after graduation. Add to this, the skills she's learning in school are not necessarily the skills she's going to need to be successful after graduation. Her asking why is not her saying, I don't care about what I'm learning. It's her looking for meaning in the information. When my co-founders and I started our company Packback, we were juniors in college, and we had personally experienced the problem of the high cost of education, and more specifically, the high cost of textbooks. We set out to create a startup that would help make education more affordable. But over the last 3 years of working on our business, we realized that the problem with education isn't a cost problem at all. It's a value problem. The problem we need to be solving is how to help students get real value out of their education. And if our goal is to educate the next generation of innovators, which it absolutely has to be, how can we teach them how to question their world and take on the world's biggest problems? I want my little sister to graduate with the skills she's going to need to change the world. Education, in my opinion, is the single most important cause that we can work on together as a society because it directly impacts every other industry. How well we prepare students while they're in school to think critically, take risks, and ask questions directly impacts whether or not they'll ever be able to innovate in the fields they go to work in after they graduate. But the problem with our education system is that from the moment students enter preschool to the moment they graduate college, they're taught to focus on answering questions, not asking them. And that's dangerous, because if we teach students that there's only one right answer, then we have to look back at the course of our history and question some of the things we thought were true ourselves. There are many things that we believed were fact that were actually false. And if it weren't for someone brave enough to question their world, we'd still believe things like this, like mercury and leeches and lead made for good, safe medicine, that women don't have the intellectual power to vote, that man could never fly or travel to space or break the sound barrier. And just look at our understanding of the Earth's orbit. Just 400 years ago, that's not that long ago, we believed that the sun revolved around the Earth because we had incomplete information, until Galileo and Copernicus were brave enough to question it, even though they faced persecution for doing so. And it might be easy to believe or think that because we have so much information available to us today, and it's so accessible, that we're immune to these kinds of silly misconceptions. But if anything, we're more at risk because we cannot confuse information with meaning. We are living in a search engine culture. We have more information available to us on the smartphones in our pocket than the President of the United States had 15 years ago. That's incredible, and it's a huge resource for students. They no longer need the skill to be able to memorize every fact they'll ever need to be successful. They can outsource their memorization and fact-finding to the digital brain online. But we cannot afford to teach students to outsource their critical thinking too. That's so important. Which brings us to a very important question also. What role do professors play today? Professors used to be the ultimate source of information for their students, but today they're being sidelined or eclipsed by this crazy wealth of information on Google. But professors have something that Google never could. They have wisdom. They have the understanding around why their subject is important and how it fits into the world at large. I actually believe that professors are more important today than they've ever been in history, but their goal has to change. No longer can they be focused on teaching their students every bit of information they've learned in their whole career of studying the subject in the few short weeks they're together in the classroom. But they must instead be focused on teaching their students why and how they should continue learning the subject on their own after they graduate. It's the difference between a zookeeper and a rehabilitator. A zookeeper keeps the animal alive, but caged and dependent. But a rehabilitator prepares that animal to be successful in the wild, and then lets them go. Through many, many conversations with students and professors over the last 3 years of working on our business, my team has realized something: that the solution to today's education woes doesn't require some huge, massive overhaul of the entire educational system, like you might imagine. It's actually incredibly simple. All it requires is teaching students how to ask great questions and then giving them the permission to do so. A few months ago, my team and I launched a question and answer platform, which is the extension of our business. And our hypothesis was that if we gave students a safe place, a truly safe place to be curious, and just a little bit of training around how to ask a great question, we could teach them to become independent, critical thinkers in the span of a couple of weeks. And the results have been absolutely incredible, more than we could have ever imagined. They've been fantastic. All of a sudden, that quiet student at the back of class that never speaks up was asking questions on our platform about his life and his world and her universe. And instead of seeing questions about homework, like what's the answer to number 4 on the homework, we were seeing questions like this: what kinds of organic compounds would you expect to be present in or around the discovery of water on Mars? Who is responsible for acknowledging when a dictator has committed an injustice? Can people with certain disabilities understand what it means to be in love? These are students from all grade levels, and these are just 3 of the 20,000 questions that we've had asked on our platform in the last 8 weeks, and they're all like this. It is possible. It's more than possible. Every student is thinking this way. They just haven't had the vehicle to express it yet. One of our professors even said this: I teach an intro-level class, and they stare at me blankly in class, but then I saw the questions they were asking on Packback, and I was amazed. I had completely underestimated them. I never realized they were wondering and thinking so much below their quiet surfaces. So how can a professor get their students to ask questions like this in their classroom? First, you have to create a truly safe, no judgment space for curiosity. And I mean that. And this is actually the hardest step of this whole process, because it requires professors to give up control. But if we remember that our goal is to create students that are successful in the wild, sometimes they're going to ask bad questions. And that's okay, because it makes room for the good ones. Next, regard curiosity as highly as you regard the right answer. Right now, students are being taught that what matters in class is what's being graded on. And, many professors talk about how important curiosity is and how important wonder is. But when it comes down to the grading period, what gets graded? Their questions and how well they considered the subject matter in their class, how well they dove deeper, how much further they took it, or was it how well they did on their exam? So this kind of requires professors to put their money where their mouth is. If we're committed to helping students become more curious, we have to be committed to also highlighting their curiosity and calling out those great moments of wonder in their classroom, the same way that you'd call out 100% on an exam or a test. Right answers are important. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean to knock on right answers at all. They're super important, but they only get us to where we've already been. But great questions move us forward. They open up potential. And finally, teach students how to structure a great question. What's exciting is that this is actually the simplest step. And it's definitely a teach a man to fish scenario, because once a student or anyone learns how to ask a great question, you can do this for the rest of your life. And those great questions become the first step on a learning path that lets you continue learning on your own after you graduate. At Packback, we use Bloom's taxonomy of cognition to structure our curriculum. Most college classes make it to the bottom 2 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, not by any fault of their own, but by sheer constraints of time. And these are the levels of remembering and understanding. This works like a pyramid, so you have to have the foundation before you can move higher. These are questions like, What happened? Where did it happen? Who was involved? What occurred? They're important because they give students context to be able to ask the higher level questions. And that's what we focus on, is continuing the conversation outside of the classroom. Once you give students that space to continue being curious and building upon what they've already learned, it's amazing. We focus on application, analysis, evaluation, and creation. And that really should be the goal of all of our classes. These are your open-ended questions, like, how can I work today to end homelessness in my city? Or what would happen if I applied design principles to the healthcare industry? Or even, how can I get my students to ask great questions in my class? They're questions that fundamentally cannot be answered with the word no. And that is critically important because it eliminates the concept of impossibility. And if we look back at any innovation throughout history, everything that is now status quo was once considered impossible until someone was brave enough to question that, and then it wasn't impossible anymore. It's critical that we eliminate the concept of impossibility from the answers to our questions. But the most important question to teach students to rephrase is, why me? Most students, like my little sister, think that there's someone out there more qualified to ask the big questions and take on the big problems than she is. But if we give students back control over their education, and we teach them how to ask a great question so they can continue learning after they graduate, there is nothing standing in the way of any student from becoming the next great innovator. So the question they should be asking instead, when they wonder, can I change the world, is, why not me? Thank you.